You are listening to Radio Belvaspata, South Africa. You are listening to Radio Belvaspata, South Africa. This show is dedicated to those who live and love from the heart in infinite ways. In today's episode, we will discuss, share, gain insights, and get clarity on the wisdom and teachings of the mystic and seer Almin, as well as discover more about the miraculous healing modality called Belvaspata. Your host for this show is Paul.
The seer Almin talks about poetic perspective. She says, life only reveals that which is real and magical to one with a poetic perspective. Others only see that which is not. That's a beautiful bit of wisdom from the seer Almin. Absolutely beautiful. Welcome to Radio Belvaspata, South Africa's episode for 26th of April 2018. I'm your host, Paul, and as usual at the sound desk is Nico, looking and making sure the signal is working, and everybody, just to let you know that the trenches are being dug for the fiber optic cables 40 meters away from our front gate. Very exciting times as we watch it advance towards us. Let us hope that working with light will bring us a better form of communication, and there's no pun intended in all of that. We are still working on our Belvaspata South Africa website, the new version of it. But quite honestly, it's not an easy process because, let's face it, day by day things change, and who wants a stagnant life and a stagnant website anyway? We've brought all of these aspects in-house. We're no longer using outside web designers or IT people. We're controlling it all ourselves, handling it all simply so that we can make changes minute by minute on any of the online digital platforms that we host. And at this moment, there's about 10 of them that we are hosting and across a multitude of social media platforms at the same time through our businesses. So much incredible stuff happening. Last week in the show, we spoke about the seer Almin discussing the mastery of the unfathomable and talking about the dysfunctional way in which the subpersonalities have been used, as well as the imbalance of their masculine as discussed. This has played an important part in causing physical inflammation and autoimmune disease as the body fights with itself. The sublime gift of the subpersonalities will soon be revealed so that their higher calling can be restored. And of course, we spoke about how the Song of the Rose has been removed from the Spiritual Journeys website because it has a missing note in it. And the alchemy of all the oils has been redone except for the fragrance alchemy for the subpersonalities, which works with the vertical and horizontal axes, bringing duality together, and the Song of the Rose. And Almin says that they were waiting for her to uncover a huge piece of the higher function of the subpersonalities that has been missing. Of course, if you've been a regular listener to the show, you'll know we often discuss the subpersonalities, and we often bring up aspects of the inner child. And probably because this part of the world that we're working in pertains to a lot about the inner child and the processes, and we're seeing all of that going. But boy, did we get a smack this week, Nico and I, in terms of some of these processes. Let's talk about that in a few minutes, and then you'll see for yourself exactly where you are at as well, and that we are all in this incredibly combined way of working together as a light family on an individual level, but through infinite expression. Last week, we also spoke about the aspects of intent, and that, we should be coming in from a state of belief and programming, that they were coming in from a state of belief systems and programming, and how this has now shifted to having us to learn from and bring in and maintain a state of inspiration as we move forward in our day-to-day lives. And one needs to really understand that it is in full trust that is now required, and it's best to get yourself a master's degree or a sainthood in trust right now, as this is what is traversing the current life experience into the higher states of living in high magic. And I've just coined a phrase here: inspired change through the paradigm of trust is the new reality for this moment. Inspired change through the paradigm of trust is the new reality for this moment. Right, we're going over now to the short class by the Seer Almeen, Journey to the Heart of God. She talks about types of intent, and we'll go further into that subject just after this class.
There are two types of intent in the universe. And intent is regarded by Toltecs as a very mysterious force. The closest way that I can come to explaining it is that intent is the manifestation of thought, or the manifestation of potential. In the angelic realms, what the intent is described as is movement. And so the intent of the universe comes in two types. The individual's intention, let's not call it intent, let's call it something else. The awareness of the universe comes in two forms. The first form is the universal awareness. But from awareness comes intent. In other words, it is that which sustains all that is created. It is the thought of God that keeps the universe going. The going part is the intent, but the awareness part, shall we say, is the holding it in existence, the holding the space for it, the dreaming the dream. How that happens, how the movement of that is in the form of a curved line. Now, the Toltecs teach that it's a straight line. I vary with that. This is not what I believe. I believe it is a tube torus, and therefore it is a curved line that gets to the point where it rests and then returns actually to source. So it's a little bit like the salmon that swims down the stream, and eventually it will come back to the same spot where it was hatched for it to lay the eggs for the future generation. The universe is like that, so are we like that. As above, so below. Well, we have our own personal intention. And this is important to realize, because if we look at our life, we don't look with ego vision generally. And because we can't see with ego vision, what happens is our life just looks like a bunch of separate things. You know, in my day here, my day is that I must remember somehow this afternoon to make sure that I get diaper cream because my baby's starting to get a diaper rash. You know, somehow at the end of the day, I want to really bathe baby properly because the bath upstairs doesn't work, so I want to go next door and do it. I'd like to wash my hair somewhere. So these are loose things. But are they loose? They're not. If you look at a feather, you see the stem of the feather and you see all these little teeny bits going out. And they look loose if you just look at them, but then when you look a little closer, you see that it's like the little bits going out to the side are holding hands. They're connected together. There is a fabric that connects what seems like disjointed experiences that holds it together in your entire life or your entire day. It is a different shape. And the shape of it is like my gosh, it's hard to explain this. The shape of it is like a tube torus, all right? But as your awareness expands, the the tube torus's parameters get larger and larger and larger and larger. So that seen from above, if you draw the first circle of where the tube torus is, and you draw the second one, and it goes on and on, it's actually like a big spiral seen from above. Do you guys get what I'm saying? Let me try this again. Okay, let's look at premise number one. The first thing to realize is that the universe is held in place by an awareness. That the awareness pertaining to the universe isn't limitless. It has boundaries. In other words, let's say this a little differently. The tube torus of intent, because the movement of the tube torus is the intent resulting from the awareness. For instance, guys, for you to bake a cake, you have to know that you're there. You have to know I'm here, therefore I can bake this cake. Okay, the cake baking is the thought put into action, but the thought itself has to be aware that you are in the kitchen. So the awareness first comes, then the intent to act upon that awareness, or the thought then manifest, comes as a result. Same for the universe. As above, so below. So there's awareness and there's intent, and the intent as considered by the angels is movement. And the movement is a huge tube torus spiral that has set boundaries before it even begins.
And welcome back to Radio Belvaspata South Africa's episode 26th of April. And the theme of the show, title of the show, is called The Sainthood of Trust, but also known as The End of Duality. Let's find out more. Lots of shifts and changes happening for us all. Many of us are working on withdrawing from these aspects of duality. Many of us are finding it incredibly hard going at times, incredibly graceful at times, and we are seeing some dual experiences. Last week and the week before, we were discussing on this show how perhaps, we were living in different realms and different dualities and different experiences all at once. But of course, that brings its own ability for us to say which one I choose to be with, and then look at the reality of that particular situation. Because if we're not careful on a spiritual level, the higher realities that we try and work from suddenly become an airy-fairy process. But we have discussed on the show, amongst a few of us here, that literally the realities are shifting day by day, and we're learning just to trust that the next stepping stone will come up, even if it's just hours and hours away. And the miraculous ways that things unfold are incredible. So let's just ponder a little bit upon these and just work with some of these golden nuggets of sharing that I'm about to work with, and just work with it a little bit. And let's just look at it, because we're all really in our own stage of evolution, of ascension. We're in our own state of masterhood. We're in our own journey along the way. So it's individual, but we're learning to do that infinite expression day by day on a different level. But the question really is, how do we withdraw from the old world of duality? The differences that are there, the greed, karma, if you want it, and all things that are of a deep belief system that creates separation. How do we release our deep-seated beliefs that these things even exist? For we know that in the new they do not, or they're not supposed to exist. This is what we understand. And only by letting go of these beliefs can we enter the gates of newness. It helps to see that each of our old beliefs are illusions, and that illusions have no power over us, or supposedly. You're the one who keeps them alive by complaining and attaching to these aspects of separation, and we know they belong to the old matrix. But once we release all aspects of separation, can we really live and be in the new? If we keep our thoughts positive and high, if we love ourselves and all others, if we release fear and judgment, if we are not controlled by others or by what the old world wants you to believe, we have free will to be who and what we choose to be. Or do we? By believing all that we see and read, we only delay our own entrance to the new. For unless we are nothing but love, then the new remains something beyond our grasp. We cannot be old and new at the same time. Or, can we? Because that seems to be some of the situations we're finding ourselves in. And yet we are all on a path of releasing and integrating this newness within us. So we have to make a choice. But what do we choose to experience? We may have fleeting glimpses of the new world, yet as long as we believe everything and everyone, we just can't live in the new unless we use our discernment to know what it is that we resonate with and what we don't, and just create a state of authenticity around that. The truth, that we are of pure love, and we'd like to try and express that, but understanding that all else is false, and that's just hard work all by itself. Yet the ego clings to what is false and what is illusion. It clings to it as if it's real. We sometimes just play at being and living in the new, but we're still sitting in both worlds, and this creates a huge rift, I think is the word, within us. You want to believe you are nothing but love, and yet you might wonder why you doubt and why you do not dismiss your darker thoughts. This is an aspect of separation. There is no good or bad or us or them or right or wrong, etc. Because these are all examples of separation. You might wonder if indeed you are divine, yet you still have lower thoughts and emotions. Just remember that we're all in a state of transition. The higher truth is that we are divine. And that's it, we must remember that. Tell it that it need not fight or resist it. There's no need for us to cling to the old. We just don't need to be separated from spirit, from the soul, from our bodies, from all these realms, because there's no such thing as separation except in our experience. And that might not be real. That's also illusion. It is only when we count on our intellect and perhaps live from the state of inspiration that we begin to empower ourselves. Things begin to shift and change as we go through this process. What is brought into our consciousness are old beliefs and cellular memories, blame, shame. It's important to take responsibility for all our choices, of course. We know that. We all choose experiences that help us grow and evolve. Or do we? The downloads of light, which are absolutely coming in on a huge shift at this moment in time, will help us release these traumatic lifetimes and therefore our attachment to the identity that they've created within us. It is up to us to free ourselves from old patterns and beliefs by working on ourselves. We do know that everything that has occurred in this life, or in other lifetimes, if we put it that way, is and has been for our highest evolution. There's always a good outcome of all of that. But if we choose to continue a pattern or feel guilty or blame ourselves or others for something, then we get nudged to let it go and just be that state of love and be powerful and responsible for all that we have chosen to be. Whatever energy is brought to the conscious self is to be released and transformed. We are asked to look deeper into all that occurs and has occurred, for there is a message within this, all for each one of us. When we experience great change, like people walking away, or a shift in business or prosperity, then we need to look deeply to find our deeper message, a deeper truth. We need to feel into every single thing that we experience, but yet it shouldn't let us stop us from moving forward. Do not use just your intellect to tell you the truth, for it won't and it can't. If we can go deep into our every circumstance that we experience, then we will release the shackles that bind us to the old, and then we'll really be truly be free. Change is just not for sissies. And there's a good coin word for yourself. Change is not for sissies. It requires great strength, courage, and trust. Change is not finite. It evolves as we do. It brings us closer and closer to being that actual infinite expression. Most people do not want to let go of their illusions. Certainly most don't want to be stripped down to nothing. So they cling to their illusions. But if everything in life is an illusion, then what is left? Because you as infinite expression, some people might call that the source, is what is left, and from here you may build on who you truly choose to be. But how do we do this? You focus only on how you want to feel. And if you want to feel peace, let all in your life be about peace. This means to have all your thoughts, feelings, and actions be of peace, with no doubt or judgment, and choosing nothing but peace. And all of us have been through that experience of searching spiritually just to create all of that. Well, how did that work out? Well, changes of journey as we go along. If you want to feel joy, then of course we've got to have our thoughts, feelings, and actions be of joy. And as we focus on how we want to feel, everything that is contrary to that will be brought to the surface and will need to be dissolved and transformed into its absolute highest potential state of being. We keep transforming these things until there's nothing left, but that we are simply an expression of infinite intent. Change may not be exactly how we envision it, of course, but it will always be what is needed. And if we truly want to ascend, then we need to drop our expectations about how it will be, and we begin to flow with whatever is presented to us each day. For it is most likely it will be something that we did not expect. Say that again. Yet it will be something that will help us move away from the old, the comfortable, and something that will help us evolve into whatever the next step is. So have you nothing left to give right now? Are you feeling empty? Are you feeling purged of so much and then a build-up of other things going on? But this is what is being asked of you. How does it feel to be nothing and have nothing? Are you afraid? Well, we need to give this over to its higher cause. And it's just a little exercise that allows us to truly letting go. It's not just an intellectual exercise. We can't think our way through this. We just need to step our way through it day by day, moment by moment. Intellect is an illusion, of course, yet most people only follow the intellect. They call it instinct, which only knows its past experiences, and they don't follow their heart or their high heart. Following our high heart means that we feel into things, not just react automatically the way that we always have done. Intuition perhaps is of the heart on some level. It is feeling, not thinking. True intuition is new. Shifting and changing does not happen in a second or when you think it should. Ascension is ongoing and infinite in its process. There's no goal except to evolve. Every choice we make helps us evolve or devolve. We step back or we step forward. Excuse me. No one can do this for you, for me, for anyone else but ourselves. We alone are responsible for our own evolution. This requires us to be awake and aware of all our choices all the time, because you simply cannot evolve using your intellect. You cannot think your way through it. You must feel through all your choices to gain clarity, and at the same time bring the full essence of the eternal ascension quality of trust into play. Ask each time, each day, will this choice help me evolve or devolve? Feel either an expansion in your heart or a restriction in your heart. Say expansion is yes and restriction would be no, and then make a conscious choice. If there is a challenge in your life, go deep into it and feel the learning. Whether it is another person mirroring to you what you have rejected or resisted, it is an opportunity to transform the energy within yourself. Our intellect tells us to run in the opposite direction, and our heart tells us to be patient and look within. For you wouldn't have attracted it if you were clear of the old pattern that still creates this in your life. Reaction is denying, judging, and resisting. Response is not attaching to or resisting the energy, but considering that what the separate ego wants to run from is the very thing your soul wants you to see. What you resist persists, the old saying goes. And if this is the truth for when we resist something, then it goes right back into the subconscious, where it will continually create until we address it and we transform it into something different. We need to trust that we are fully supported and we are guided in all our heart choices. Every high heart-based choice we make helps all, for then we share what we are within automatically. And our vibration either brings things into wholeness or it depletes. So we've got to decide what is our choice and make it. That is our responsibility. That is the choice that we need to make. So I was saying earlier that, this week Nick and I came under a huge attack. And we realized that we hadn't taken full ownership of certain projects that we were working on. And as we were still trying to maintain balance and clarity, we were trying to work on an original intention of something that we created, but we were no longer inspired to work with it. So, of course, it had to come crashing to a noisy close, and it's done that. But it was an incredibly challenging situation, which still remains around in our books and something we're having to work on and perhaps, even like develop it on a legal level. We were speaking a little bit over the last few weeks as well about the inner child. And in this, I'm going to say, email attack on us, demanding ownership of certain projects, we could see the inner child crying out to be acknowledged, crying out to own itself. There was a temper tantrum being flown about, and it didn't care what it said. It didn't care who it hurt. It just had to divide and conquer and get what it wanted along the way. And we've just been working through all of this week, and it took us a day or two just to allow this process to come on. It took us a day or two to try and rest a little bit and just allow it to go. But ultimately, we've had to make a decision that we are taking full ownership of the project and moving forward. And that's the way it has to be. You have to decide for yourself who's going to be in your space and what the price is for that person or those people being in your space. And we just don't feel it's worthwhile any longer because it's not in a state of evolution or ascension there, and it is actually just depleting our energy and our time. And so therefore we haven't been valuing ourselves, and there's been no authenticity for ourselves in that particular process. So a big lesson to learn, and Nick and I are standing up and then working with it, and feedback coming as we're going along. And of course, we won't give you the day-to-day details of it because that doesn't really matter, but it's part of our ascension journey, and we're stepping with it. Now, along with it came decisions of what we had to do either as the warrior or as the sage, and that now leads us to where Almin will now discuss the archetypical roles of the sage and warrior in living in a reality of magic. This audio and class comes from her series Reclaiming the Cosmic Underworld. This goes back to September 2, 2013, just 5 years back, but how pertinent for today. So let's listen to Almina. She teaches us about insights gained on living in high magic and the Toltec warrior.
Now, there is another reality we have been studying, and it is in fact the direction of the north and the east. When you look at the vertical figure 8 of the I Ching, the Zolkin, the Tree of Life, etc., the north is in the very top and the east is below it. They're both part of the upper loop of the figure 8. So those hold the kingdom of magic, the reality of magic. And the reality of magic has the elder, no surprise, because if you cannot wield magic with absolute impeccability and wisdom in the application of it, because it touches all life forms, everything is connected, then you have no business doing magic. So the elder, the sage, the wise one, is part of this reality, and it represents the east. In the north is the warrior. What does the warrior have to do with the magical realms? We have not understood warriorship. Those who studied with me before this journey became a calling that I could not say no to, studied the Toltec way. And a group would usually commit to 3 week-long times spent with me in training for a year. If they wish to continue, they can. And I trained apprentices to become Toltecs. You only become a Toltec when you have mastered certain things within. But it is an inner spiritual warriorship. And it ensures that when you wield power, power is wielded with the utmost impeccability. If someone said to me, what are the 2 main characteristics of the mysticism of the Toltec Nagual, I would say, firstly, it is the pristine wielding of power. But secondly, it is how to turn adversity into perception. Because adversity has been, over the ages, the allies of death. And when you turn it into perception, you have stolen those allies for yourself. So adversity becomes your friend. It becomes your strong suit, your insights, your perception. So the pristineness of the spiritual warrior has every reason to be part of the magical kingdom. These realities must be lived as layers of expression that are integrated and working together.
You're back in Radio Belvaspata, South Africa studio, broadcasting worldwide, 26th of April 2018. I'm sure some of you are quite taken with the fact that I can get the dates right. Well, I have a nice big screen here in the studio and it displays the date. So now you know how that works. There was the mystic and seer Almeen really talking about the roles of the sage and warrior and how they've been misunderstood and what needs to be brought into place. Sheer magic. Beautiful comment up on Almeen Diary where a post was put up that this morning when I opened the shop, and that's the fragrance alchemy shop, the Egyptian fragrance alchemy shop that Almeen owns. I picked up such an extremely strong feeling of excitement. And the question posed to Almeen is, where is that coming from? And Almeen said that yesterday, in the early morning, I had a visit from an angelic being. And when I smelled the fragrance of lilies, he explained that the reason we are recognizing the holy uniqueness of the oils is that we are creating and working with fragrances that represent angels, and more recently, angel gods. Apparently, each one of the angels has a special fragrance, and they come to where their individual fragrance is being worn or stored. They are therefore congregating in our bottling and storage areas in the shop. There's just a side comment there. You'll know that, as we work through the angels of Belvaspata, through the sigils, this also means that every sigil therefore has its own fragrance, and as each angel must have at the same time, and that attraction is bringing the whole process together. So this is the alchemy of Belvaspata that we're also talking about. Almeen continues and she says, they know that you are now aware of this and are excited to spend the day with you. Many of our highly sensitive students treat the shop like a pilgrimage site. It's a holy place to visit. Now we know why. Tourists who come in there are changed in a subtle way. To indicate just how much power these angels emit, when I went out this morning to empty the trash in the backyard, the wind, which was blowing from a completely different direction than usual, carried a message of great excitement and joy. I could see that even the dogs could feel it. Isn't that a beautiful feeling? I'm sure you can feel that excitement, that joy, that is anticipation that is building up. It is something that is very, very tangible nowadays. And even though we are working through sometimes incredibly stressful situations and learning just to be graceful as we move through things, but that tangible experience and anticipation of joy is something that we continuously work towards having. The further question that was given to Almeen is, when you're working in the oils, they smell different in the space around you than in other areas of the shop. And why is this? And the seer responds. She says, I'm acting automatically when I blend the oils, just like when I'm writing a book. When that happens, it feels as though I am in a vortex, an empty space with just me and the oils in front of me. That's why I often tune out when others are speaking to me as I work on them. It's like a dimensional change. The oils have more notes in a higher dimension. They will, however, change on the shelf to what they smell like in that higher space. In other words, the oils are being created in a high dimension, but step that dimension down to be accessed at a lower one, and that's what makes them holy. This is also why you have discovered that they keep changing. Then incredible thoughts about how we are accessing all of these different realms and we can actually feel their process and be influenced by them all at once. I don't know about you, but I've discovered I can multitask on so many different levels, whereas many people in our environment are not able to do all of that. It's like I can process multiple levels of information and activity in one go, but many people can only focus on one or two things. And that's an interesting dynamic for me. I'm learning to trust that for myself. There's another aspect now where Almeen talks about the webinar that came up just a little while ago, that she gave. She talks about the third stage, and she says, my precious ones, as you ended doing the initiation in that webinar, those participating evolved into the third stage of awakening. It is likely that this will ripple through the rest of our light family during the coming week. I'm deeply moved by what you and your dedication have accomplished. So much love and praise, Almeen. Isn't that incredible just to know that? And I've been feeling those ripples of energy and shifts. In fact, there's like an internal desire, a wanting to achieve that now. There's no longer a trepidation or fear associated with it. There's an excitement, a tangible feeling of wanting it all to come through. Really, really beautiful. So now we've been talking about inner and outer space as well. And in upcoming webinars by this year, they'll be using her Jubilation album, the music from that, to explain how to use it as a musical bridge between the inner and outer space. It's a method of inner divination and guidance, and that's really just the sponge between the inner and the outer, and begins to absorb the inner and outer processes and eventually becomes one. The track that we're going to play now is one from the Saradesi Fountain of Youth Sound Elixirs. It's called Music for Rejuvenation, and both the vocals and instruments were composed and performed spontaneously by Almeen. And this is the music of Almeen. Enjoy Desert Moonlight. And there we were listening to the music from the Seer Almeen called Desert Moonlight, taken from her Jubilation album. Connections and downloads are available on spiritualjourneys.com. So we were talking earlier about, earning a sainthood in living in trust. And I'd like to introduce you to Saint Darshana, all the way from Vancouver in Canada. Hello, Darshana.
Wahaha, Paul, that's hilarious.
Well, we should claim the sainthood, because if we don't understand the fullness of God consciousness quite yet, because we're still developing it, at least let's take one step at a time.
Okay. We'll take we'll take one step at a time.
Well, I think that's all we've got. You and I have talks quite regularly. And, the stepping stone process is most interesting, because sometimes those stepping stones are quite rocky and sometimes they're quite smooth, and you never know what you're going to get day by day.
Well, isn't that what life is about? It's a constant roller coaster journey, isn't it?
It is indeed. It's incredible.
And we'd be fools to think otherwise. Very,
very much so. What I have really been seeing is that we are able to, let's put it this way, we had so much shifts and changes going on that we create something brand new today, and that shifts then by tomorrow, and in the middle of that, the structuring of that process, we are rebuilding new things. The personnel around us, I think, are learning to adapt to what is going to happen today as completely new, but it just constantly shifts against the old paradigm of, well, let's put something strong in place, a firm foundation, let's do all of that. And yet it just completely shifts from underneath us, and this new dynamic is emerging day by day.
And I think that's the secret to life, is not getting attached to anything. It's like the picture I sent you from of the view from my home. Of the spring blossom, the blossom tree, with the view of the mountain, the snow-capped mountains in the background.
Yeah.
I've got the winter mountains still in the background, and the spring blossoms in the front, and we've got a meld of spring and summer, spring and winter all in one picture. So we've got to just accept that we've got a little bit of everything all at the same time. Don't get attached to anything, because even nature is representing it for us,
Yeah, and everything is perfect in that picture. It's just absolutely amazing.
Yep, take it as it comes. Every day is a new celebration of life, and that's the only way we're going to get through this.
This phase of, shall we say, shift that is going on.
Yep, and it's a constant shift.
Yeah.
I say, even nature, Mother Earth is constantly shifting herself, right?
No, there's absolutely beautiful picture. And just to tell our listeners that if you want to see that picture, it's up on Instagram on yesterday or last night's Almeen Wisdom. We superimposed Almeen Wisdom over that picture. So thank you for sharing that with us. I saw that as well. Yeah, no, the duality of the beauty of it is actually in perfection, that it's not right or wrong. It just simply is a state of transition that is constantly there. Are you there?
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so we were just talking about that picture depicting a state of transition, and how we have to understand that we are always in a state of transition. And yet many of us want to look to that outcome for something, but there is never an outcome. There's just an experience, and then it begins to shift again.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. We need to just, and that's and I think that's where the trust comes in. It all goes back to our state of minds, and our state of minds need to just be in this. We need to believe. We need to trust. We need to have open minds, because when we have these closed minds, we don't inspire a life of faith or courage or belief or trust. And we fail to realize that we spend the same amount of energy and effort to aim high in life and gain that abundance and prosperity as it does to accept misery and poverty, you know.
Right, exactly.
So we really need to start backing our desires for this wonderful life that we obviously all want for ourselves by this concept that we all throw around called trust.
Yeah.
You know, and like you spoke about this intuition, you know, I've started following my intuition hugely and often, you know, especially when logically things don't make sense.
Yeah.
And you know, you have to evaluate it. You have to give it some serious consideration because, you know, you've got to weigh the consequences and you know and see, because, like, you know, I guess it doesn't always work out, and sometimes it'll be dead wrong. But like you said, you know, I think we've got to start listening to the heart now. It's not always about the mind. So trust is a huge thing for me right now.
Very much so. You know what I have found for myself in the processes that has been going on, that there has to be an underlying foundation for the work of living in this quality of trust, which we are all obviously developing and realizing and allowing it to transform into its highest potential. And that is like that sense of inner confidence that you are supported, that you have, you know, that infinite journey supporting one all the way through. And I'm just finding that trust by itself is the work that's been doing, and quite honestly, it's been work for the last year for me. But then I find some aspects of my confidence is being weakened on some levels, and I've had to like retain and begin to work on that and restructure it in terms of being able to support these levels of trust that are developing.
But you know what, I actually think that it comes from old programming, because we've always been taught to trust in an infinite being, right? But have we been taught to trust in ourselves?
That's it, yeah.
You know, and I think that's where we fall short. And I think we really need to stop and think about that self. You know, and this is why I was saying, you know, if you could play that song, Trust Yourself by Bob Dylan.
Oh, yes, yeah, beautiful.
It would be just absolutely perfect. So for everyone out there listening, if they could actually go and like Google the lyrics or go and listen to the song Yourself by Bob Dylan, it's actually so appropriate, because we've got all these old programs that don't. No one's ever taught us to trust ourselves.
Yeah.
We've always been taught to trust in an external source.
External, something
but
outside
what about
of us.
us?
Oh, no,
I think
that's a very interesting comment.
And I think that's like a very pertinent component to this alchemical equation. And I think once we add that to the equation, I think we're looking at magic.
Yeah, I think there's some very good words there as well, in terms of, you know, it is magic, because at the end of the day, we are infinite expression as we develop that, and everything is contained within us in an expanded state. Then we have to trust every single thing that there is, including ourselves. And if everything is emitting from us and through us, then that creates a whole new dynamic. Isn't that wonderful?
Yes, it is wonderful, you know, but like for our finite minds to just accept that trust, you know what I'm saying? For our finite minds to start accepting trust for ourselves, because a lot of us probably still, with those limiting beliefs, still view ourselves. It would be easier to view ourselves, to trust ourselves would be an easier concept.
Yeah,
I still think that's something, something to really try and look at.
Well, certainly work to do. We can never deny the fact that there's 100% work to do 100% of the time.
Yep, always. always work in progress. I always say, watch the space.
Yeah, accent on the word space, because we fill it up with something else that needs to be brought up and out and within ourselves. But, do you agree that there's this sense of anticipation, of excitement, an underlying excitement about what is to be?
Definitely. I actually kind of felt a shift happening late last week. I felt almost like this lightness of being. I do believe that there's still lots to deal with and lots to work through. I understand that. But it's like we experiencing spring here in Vancouver, and it came a little late. But, it's almost timely. I feel like I've come out of hibernation and I'm ready and raring to go. There's almost, like you say, there's an excitement in the air.
And fantastic, because that's a good feeling of spring and newness and growth all around one. When we get that also happens beautifully here. So, but I think we've definitely seen and felt the ripple of that third stage of awakening as it just pours out through each one of us. I'd be interested with our listeners just to get comment, if anybody would like to comment or send us an email or just log on or send us a message. All sorts of processes. And by the way, everyone, we just want to let you know that if you go onto our Facebook page under Belvaspada South Africa, the header sheet shows all the different forms. There's a video on there of how you can connect with us. But as I was saying earlier, our website is not up and running. We need to learn to trust ourselves enough to build that and then put it out there, I think. What do you say, Darshana?
Why not? Why not, Paul?
Incredible. Well, Darshana, thanks for joining us. Just a short chat tonight. And hopefully in the next week or so, we can connect again and have some more conversation, and we'll find out more about how we're awakening through trust.
Thank you, Paul, for having me on the show.
It's very nice to be able to talk from Johannesburg all the way to Vancouver. And technology is on our side tonight, but I'm saying that quietly because you know what happens when we talk about it.
If you believe it, it will happen. Trust, Paul, trust.
How wonderful. Thank you, Saint Darshana. This is Saint Paul saying goodbye, and I'll see you soon. I'll chat to you off air.
All righty.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
And there was Darshana all the way from Vancouver. Thank goodness for technology. Isn't it absolutely amazing that beyond time and space, we can all communicate just in this exact moment together. Really, really beautiful. So there's a question that comes up as well on Almeen Diary, that how does awakening compare to God consciousness? And Almeen is now going to share how the most notable difference lies in the function of linear mind. And Darshana was touching on aspects of that during our conversation. She says that this centralized mind is mostly dormant in God consciousness, whilst in awakening, self-hypnotism is utilized to keep it in place so that cellular decentralized mind can activate in the cells. So let's listen to this aspect of how does awakening compare to God consciousness with the Seer Almeen.
So let us now take a careful look at how we can compare the God consciousness stages to the stages of awakening. The first two stages experiences the emptiness and the fullness, respectively. This is similar to what we have in the God consciousness. In the first stage, life events lose their appeal. One becomes disassociative. It's just a feeling like there's nothing really that matters. You don't have any desire. Things that people do for entertainment, they look shallow and banal to you. So, in the second stage, one retreats into one's inner space, becoming antisocial. That's the place where you experience the fullness of your solitude. But you don't really like being around other people. And I remember when I was in the bliss stage of God consciousness, which is the second stage of God consciousness, similar to this one, that it also was rather painful to have to interact with other people. To interact with other people pulled me out of the wide expansion of my bliss, and I just wished they would leave me alone, let me sit in a corner and just dissolve into this puddle of awareness. It kept pulling me out of it. So I also became somewhat antisocial during the second stage of God consciousness, just like what happens in the second stage of the stages of awakening. Now, linear mind in this second stage is very dormant, and you're just in the expansion in which you feel like everything is visible to you, but you can't really balance your checkbook kind of feeling. A linear mind isn't working very well. So, what happens in the third stage? Now, in God consciousness, the third stage is re-entering the human condition, engaging once again in everyday activities, but keeping the wide expansion of knowing that this is just a role you're playing, and this massive observer observes you having the experiences, and the observer is yourself. In the third stage of the awakening, this occurs. Music, or a spoken phrase, plays over and over in one's head, a form of self-hypnotism, which is contracting the mind to keep it in place while cellular mind activates. I've explained this to you during my week off from everything. That's what happened. So while cellular mind activates, cellular mind starts to know without knowing. And it's easy to discard linear mind, but it's not to be. Because let's go back to God consciousness. In God consciousness, the message to me was, as I was in this deep bliss, to try and push me through into re-entering the human condition, it said, live where the curved line and the straight line meet. So curved line and straight line represents, curved line is the details of everyday life. The flat line is expansion, expanded awareness. So you must live in expanded awareness while being very cognitive of what happens around you every day. So it's necessary, as you activate in this third stage more fully the cellular mind, that you don't lose the linear mind of the brain, the cognitive mind. Therefore, the self-hypnotism keeps it in place because it keeps a contracted perspective while the cells have an expanded perspective.
You're back in studio with me, Paul, as your host on tonight's episode of Radio Bell Hospital South Africa. Nico's doing a great job there, handling the sound and the tracks as they come up to be played. We were speaking with Darshana in Vancouver just a few minutes ago, and there we were listening to the Seer Almeen as she described the difference between awakening and comparing it to God consciousness. During a recent post up on Almeen Diary, just to develop this particular conversation right now, somebody asked about the ceremony of peace and described their experience, and Almeen said that they were seeing their future. But listen to what she said in detail. She said that the day before the ceremony, I had the following experience, which relates to your experience. I saw the eons-old evolutionary journey that we've been on, as though the path of illumination during the dream cycles was like entering an illuminated cave, where confined but illuminated. Life felt pressured and full of hardship right before the birth into the stages of awakening, like going through a narrow tunnel or a birth canal. But whilst in the fourth stage of awakening, I realized that dreaming and awakening were just two more opposites, as though we could never escape duality and the hardship it brings. Something inside me rebelled at being trapped in never-ending repetitive cycles. Suddenly it was as though something around me shattered, and I was no longer in any stages. I couldn't see any boundaries, just the profoundness of my being, and all reference points were shattered. And she says to the person who sent that comment that you were seeing your future. Isn't that absolutely incredible? Perfectly in line with where we went all the way through it, through the show tonight, really talking about these tube torus and the lines and the horizontal lines, and as they bend in and out. And Almin was then discussing as we're going on the different aspects. So we've had an incredibly full show, lots of insights to share, really been incredible. And we are going to be playing out now with what we think is an apt, beautiful track by Ennio called May It Be. It's one of the Lord of the Rings soundtracks, really beautiful. But before we go, we just want to say this: move with the mark of the unknown upon you, and life will enter your blood like a river. This world was always holy, and you were always a rising flame upon its altar. And that's Tokopa Turner. You can find her online. Beautiful things that she has to share as she's going along. So that's really the end of the show, and we are now going to play it, as I said, with this track from Enya, Let It Be. And until next week, we'll be back again in May already. It's a long weekend for us in South Africa, and we hope to get some rest, and we hope to get some downtime just to be in stillness and silence amongst ourselves and work at our own pace as we're going along. We wish you the best, and we thank you, our Light family, for tuning in either live on tonight's show or as a podcast. And Stacey, thank you so much for that beautiful email. So great to hear from you. And for our other followers here on the radio show, if you want to hear as soon as we broadcast, just press the follow button right now on your Spreaker app, and you'll know when we start to broadcast live, because you'll get an email telling us that we are up and live. That's it. This is the end of April. This is the end of the show. End of the week for us. Tomorrow's a holiday. South Africans, enjoy. Rest of the world, enjoy spring as it comes up in the Northern Hemisphere. And from us, love, praise, gratitude, and trust. Good night.
May it be an evening star shines down upon you. May it be when darkness falls, your heart will be true. You walk a lonely road. Oh, how far you are from home.
You've been listening to Radio Balbaspata, South Africa. Thank you for listening and sharing in our discussion. Should you have any questions with regards to the healing modality of Balbaspata or have any healing needs, please send us an email to info@balbaspata.co.za or add comments to our page on Spreaker.com so we can work on providing a suitable response. We now close this episode with the eternal ascension qualities of love, praise, gratitude and trust, and look forward to sharing again with you next week. Goodbye.